When I first transitioned, I was working in a shop, and I transitioned while I was working in the shop, and it was a very awkward process. It was a very desperate process of me wanting to stop looking like a man and start looking like a woman, and I wasn't doing a great job. I still had a lot of stubble. My hair was really short because I'd gone through this really weird, desperate attempt at like freedom in gender and non-binariness, and nothing says non-binary like an undercut with short hair on top. So I had done that, and I had very short hair, which I dyed pink, and I wasn't on hormones yet, and I was working at the shop, and I started wearing fake boobs, and I just looked like a man with boobs. It was very awkward, it was very embarrassing, but people were pretty cool about it. They'd had a trans woman working there before, so people were surprisingly cool about it. There was some transphobia, there was some like really horrible transphobia, but then I quit that job and I started a new job working in a bank, and it was just a temp job. It was just for like 3 months. And by the time I started there, my hair had grown to about here, so I had a bisexual bob, and I dyed it black, and I passed. And I'd started hormones, and I was passing. And obviously we had a lot of people working there, and there were different generations of people, and there was like a young generation who were like around 20 years old, who liked to go out together and get pissed. I was never invited to get pissed, by the way. And one of them, I believe, Googled me. They Googled my name. They must have. I mean, this is the only way I can figure out how this happened. And then showed my YouTube channel to the other young people. And so one day I was in the girls' toilet, and this girl started talking to me about my YouTube channel, and it really was I was upset about it because I didn't really want to be out as trans, and I didn't want to talk about being trans. I don't like to talk about being trans with cis people. I love to talk about being trans with trans people. But I just don't want to talk about it with cis people. It's not their business. I want them to, like, their interaction with me in terms of my gender should be limited to using the correct pronouns or grammatical gender, depending on the language, and that's it. Let's leave it at that. Let's talk about Lord of the Rings. So at that point, I kind of thought, I was like, okay, everyone here knows I'm trans. That sucks. I didn't want this. I didn't plan on this, but now I have to just come to terms with that. So I know that like people come to my YouTube channel sometimes to tell me how I don't look like a real woman. I've also had comments where people are like, what gender are you? I'm confused. Tell us what gender you are, because this is ridiculous. And I was like, okay, I guess. Like, just so you know, I am genderqueer. I am a non-binary person, and I use she and her pronouns and feminine grammatical gender in Slovenian, and I identify strongly with trans woman, trans womanhood. And that's who I am. And generally, I want you to just treat me like a woman, but I want you to treat me like a woman with respect. So I'm not going to make you a sandwich, unfortunately, unless you're my wife, in which case I will absolutely make you a sandwich. I'll make you a million sandwiches. I love you, dear. I love you. So yeah, I've had some comments that are like, how can anyone think that you're a woman? But like, I also, when I'm working customer service, I speak in a like even higher pitched voice, right? So I'm like, or like a softer voice, you know, with lots of inflections. And I'm like, hello, how can I help you today? What can we do for you here at the bank? Would you like a foot massage? So normally I would talk like that, and it wasn't a problem. No one looked twice. But one day I had a cold, so I went to work, and I was probably like, hello, what can we do for you today? Would you like a foot massage? And 3 things happened. There was an old woman who was like, what's wrong with your voice? And I was like, nothing. And then there were 2 guys who clocked me, and you can tell when a guy clocks you because they get mad, like they're angry, and or they're horny. I mean, one or the other. But like these 2 guys were clearly like they had seen me as a woman. They'd come to talk to me, and then when I had spoken, they had heard a man's voice. So they did what, of course, they all do: look at my tits, and then they were rude to me, and it pissed me off. And I can be a little defensive at times. So this guy, he was being rude to me, and then when he left, he called me mate. This was in the UK. And in the UK, the customers call you mate if they see you as a man. And if they see you as a woman, they usually call you like darling or something. or sweetheart. So, and he called me mate. It was very much on purpose. And as soon as he did it, he looked at my face with a grin because he wanted to see what effect it was having on me. So then he walked out of the building and he was still staring at me with this like shit-eating grin because he was so happy that he'd misgendered me. And I was holding a tablet because this is the future that we're living in. I was holding a tablet and behind the tablet, I just flipped him off and I smiled like. And he got really excited because now he realised he could get me in trouble. So he marched back in to the bank, super excited, and he found the floor manager and he spoke to her and I was just like, oh, I fucking lost my job. It's fucking over now. And so after he left, she asked to speak to me in an office. And so we sat down in the office and she wanted to hear my side. She was like, what happened? This guy is saying that you flipped him off for no reason. Of course he said it like that, right? Because the point was to get me in trouble. So I thought, well, clearly she knows that I'm transgender, right? So I'm just going to say it. So I said he could tell that I'm transgender and he was being rude to me because of it, and he gendered me as a man, and he was clearly trying to wind me up and he was clearly trying to upset me, and I'm sorry, I don't know what came over me. I got really upset and I just did it. I flipped him off. And she listened to me and quietly, and then she said, well, I knew you was a lesbian, but I didn't know you used to be a man. And it was one of the greatest moments of my life. Because, of course, I'm not a lesbian, I'm bisexual, but I had a female partner who's still my female partner. And people knew that I had this partner, so apparently some people were like, oh, clearly a lesbian. I'm actually a genderqueer bisexual. I loved her interpretation of it. And it was like, she obviously didn't know, like, the right thing to say to trans people. And we get very pissy on the internet and we're like, don't ever say this. Well, then, like, fuck you. Never say this. But like in real life, I think most trans people accept that like people will say awkward things sometimes, and she didn't mean anything bad by it. And honestly, I was so happy that she didn't know I was transgender. I loved it. And I was like really upset and really worried. And she didn't call. She said she was going to call back the guy because he wanted to know that he'd told her like he wanted to know how I'd been disciplined for my behaviour. So he'd given her his phone number, and I don't know if she actually called him, but she didn't discipline me in any way, which was really nice, because I guess she just, like, she appreciated how, like, he was being transphobic, so he deserved to get flipped off or whatever. But I was, like, shaking. I have really bad social anxiety, and although I apparently have, like, spontaneous bravery in which I can, like, flip off a stranger, I have really bad social anxiety, and I was just general anxiety as well. And I was sweating and I was so upset, but I went on my break soon after that and I called my girlfriend and I was like, she said she didn't know I used to be a man. And I was so upset about being misgendered and being harassed, but at the same time I was so excited about my boss not knowing I was trans and then like being cool about it. And I just loved the line, I knew you was a lesbian, but I didn't know you used to be a man. When she said that, I said, yeah, I don't like to talk about it, which is true. And because I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to open up this discussion about it because it's not like it's not that fun for me. And although generally I had suspected that I was often passing because people wouldn't harass me or look twice at me. When I was in this awkward middle stage where I had pink hair and just looked like a man with tits, people stared at me all the time. They stared at me when they didn't speak to me, they stared at me when they did speak to me. They would sometimes like aggressively misgender me because they could tell that I was trying to like transition or look like a woman, and that had stopped. And people had stopped looking at me twice. People had, like, even when they spoke to me, they'd stopped looking at me twice. And so I suspected, but I'd never spoken to anyone who was surprised that I was transgender. And it obviously has happened more than once at this point because it's been several years. But that was like there's a really amazing, validating turning point for me, because you don't want to like ask someone, you don't want to be like, hey, did you know I'm transgender? Just to get like the response of being like, no, I didn't. You've done an amazing job. You look such like a real woman. I don't want to hear that, but actually, I definitely want to hear that. I definitely want to hear how fishy I am and how beautiful, incredibly beautiful woman I am. I think as a non-binary person, I am expected to want to be completely androgynous, and I definitely tried that at one point, and I think it's hard when you have particular features. Like, it's great if you're like medium height and you have like medium features, but if, I don't know, if you're like very tall and you have particular masculine features, it can be harder to pull off androgyny, especially the kind of androgyny that we kind of worship online. There's a very particular androgyny, and it isn't people who were assigned the gender at birth that I was. And what I found frustrating about androgyny was that people pick a gender for you. Like, they're confused by you, but often when they are confused, they'll try and figure it out, and that's why they often will look at you. Your bubbies. Like, I've always found that people who are confused about your gender, they look at your chest because they're trying to figure out what's going on. And if you have boobs, that helps them figure it out. But the way that our minds work, because of how we're raised, is that if you can't gender someone immediately, then you try and figure out how to gender them. And then when you think you've figured out the right cues, you put them in one box or the other. And I found that very frustrating, because it means that you really don't have control. Like, you can control it to a certain degree. So for me, it was really important that people didn't get to choose my gender for me. So this is how I like to be. This is how I like to live. Last summer, I was involved in, I wrote and co-starred in a short film called Happy Bi Day. And I play a beautiful transsexual woman. And someone commented on the YouTube channel and they said something like, oh, I just thought you were a woman. I had no idea you were trans. And that's so officially offensive, right? But like, I love stuff like that. Like, I do not encourage you to say it. I don't want you to make it weird and be like, you look like a real woman. But when people who like don't know any better, it's like when a little kid is, when you first transition, when I was transitioning and I was like a confusing gender, little kids would point at me and ask their mum what gender I was, right? And like, I love that. Or like kids would be like, think that because my nails were painted, even though I had a beard, that I must be a woman. I love that shit. But like, if you're a woke adult, you can't do that. But you have to be a little bit unwoke and then accidentally say something a little bit ignorant, but that's really a fantastic compliment. And then I like it. And then it's okay. But you know, you're welcome to just tell me what an incredibly beautiful, beautiful woman I am. It's so weird sometimes to be like so involved in like queer community and queer culture, and you forget that like, of course my manager was like, oh, you're a lesbian who used to be a man. Like, I understand totally why she thought that and felt that way, because like in the mainstream that's just like a normal conventional perception, and she didn't mean anything bad by it. And it's cute and it's funny. I used to, when I lived in England, I used to get T blocker injections, and I had to get them like once every 2 or 3 months. And I couldn't do it on my own. That's scary. I wouldn't even try. But I had, so I went to the GP, and a nurse would inject me in the butt, which my nephew once had to come with me for that, because I was babysitting him and he was like 4 years old. And when we got home, he told everyone, Vivi got stabbed in the butt. Of course, I then had to explain the way in which I got stabbed in the butt, because that wasn't a very good description. Thank you. Those nurses, when I moved out of England, I moved to Slovenia. One of the nurses was stabbing me in the butt, and I explained that I was leaving, and I was going, and she got another nurse who had previously stabbed me in the butt, and they both gave me hugs to like wish me farewell, and I had genuinely probably spent all of about half an hour with them, like in my life. Like, I didn't know them well, we weren't friends, but they obviously had some positive empathy of some kind towards me as like a trans person, and it's like awkward and weird. It totally made me horribly uncomfortable, but at the same time, it was very sweet to know that, like, despite the fact that they were definitely the kind of, I knew you was a lesbian, but I didn't know you used to be a man type of people. They felt kindly towards me, and I thought that was really sweet. Because the real world isn't really split between like TERFs and like trans activists. That's not most of the world. Most of the world is just people who sometimes care, sometimes don't care, sometimes are douchebags, whether they know the right terminology or not.